Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share with you guys about my experience taking the HESI A2 exam. I just took the exam a couple weeks ago, and so today I'm going to be doing a few things. First, I will talk about the structure and the overview of what the test looks like. Second, I'm going to talk about the sections that I had on my test and the types of questions that I saw on those sections. And then third and finally, I'm going to talk about some of the study tips that I have and resources that I used that helped me immensely and that I want to share with you all. So let's dive right in. All right, so first things first, I'm going to talk about the structure of the HESI test. So this HESI does have up to 9 sections on the exam. Usually your school is going to select out of those 9 sections which ones they want you to take. So those 9 sections that the HESI has are vocabulary and general knowledge, reading comprehension, grammar, basic math skills, biology, anatomy and physiology, chemistry, and physics. Each section on the HESI exam has between 25 to 50 questions for each section. Each section on the HESI exam is individually scored. So you receive a specific score for each section of the test, and then at the end you also get a cumulative score, so your total score averaged from all of the sections that you took on the exam. Now your nursing school is going to have a particular requirement for a passing grade for the exam, and they also may have specific requirements for each individual section also, and it just depends on the nursing school that you're applying to. But usually for most nursing schools, a passing grade is going to be somewhere between 75% and 80%. Now for the school that I'm applying to, which is in the state of Florida, I was required to get at least an 80% on each individual section on the test. So that's an important thing to look into as you are applying to nursing schools. Just make sure that you're aware of what the requirement is for the nursing school or nursing schools that you're applying to. So now let's talk real briefly about the sections that I actually saw on my test and the types of questions, some of the types of questions that I saw on it. So I was required to take reading comprehension, grammar, math, anatomy and physiology, and vocab. And I also had a personality quiz and a learning styles quiz that was at the end as well. Some nursing schools might require you to do those sections and some may not. So on the test that I took, the anatomy and physiology section, I had 30 questions total. Now, each test gives you some questions that are scored, and then you're also going to receive some questions that are just pilot questions, which means that they are testing out those questions to see how they work and how people respond to them, and they're actually not scored. So from what I understand, on the test, at least currently, you get 5 pilot questions on each section. So really, out of those 30 questions, only 25 were scored. And the same is true of all the other sections. I had 5 pilot questions that were not scored. And you actually never know which ones those were. They don't give you like a breakdown at the end. So that's just for, on their end, I guess, it helps them. So anyways, I had 30 questions on anatomy and physiology. Then on the reading section, I had 55 questions and 55 questions for all the rest of the sections. So for grammar, for math, and for vocab, I also had 55 questions to answer. So as you can imagine, with 5 sections and that many questions, the test did take quite a bit of time. And typically on the HESI exam, you're given about 5 hours, maybe a little bit over 5 hours to complete the entire exam. And for me, I think it took me about 4 hours or 4.5 hours total to complete all of those 5 sections, plus the learning quiz and the personality quiz that I had at the end. So in terms of the types of questions that I saw on the exam, I'm going to mostly talk about the types of questions I saw on math and on anatomy and physiology. And then I'll briefly talk about some of the questions on the grammar, the reading, and the vocab. So on math, they have a lot of ratio and proportion problems, a lot of that. There also were a huge number of questions having to do with fractions. So that is really important to know how to work with fractions. So multiplying, dividing, adding fractions, subtracting fractions, all of that. You want to be really, really comfortable with that because at least for me, there were a ton of those questions on the exam. There were a lot of word problems for math, and there also were a lot of unit conversion problems, and a lot of the math unit conversion problems were using units that would be used in a medical setting. So you do want to know how to convert from one unit to another very easily, and you want to have those conversions memorized that you can just quickly pull them out of your head and just know exactly how to do that. I may do some future videos just breaking down the individual sections on the HESI. If that would be helpful for you guys, definitely go ahead and comment below what sections you'd be interested in hearing a little bit more detail, or maybe getting some practice questions on. And then finally, this has to do with fractions as well, but there were a lot of questions about comparing fractions. So for example, they'd ask you, which of these fractions is the greatest? And then they'd have a list of fractions, and you would need to know how to simplify all of those fractions in order to figure out which of them had the greatest value. So I would say primarily focus on those for the math section, because they have a lot of questions specifically related to those topics. So then moving on to anatomy and physiology, the HESI focuses a little bit more on the anatomy side of things than the physiology. So it's focusing more on the structure of the body rather than the function of the body. There are some physiology questions, but it really is more related to the anatomy side of things. And I had taken the TEAS test last year, and the TEAS test focuses a lot on physiology, so that kind of threw me off at first when I started studying. But once I realized that, that helped me to really focus my studies more on the anatomy and on the structure of the body, memorizing like specific bones and specific muscles, etc. And it really focuses on a kind of broad overview of things and doesn't get a lot into the specifics of how things in the body are working. On anatomy and physiology, you do need to know about a lot of different topics having to do with anatomy and physiology, but you do not need to know a whole lot in depth. You want to make sure that you're able to define a lot of the basic things that are going to be covered on the anatomy and physiology section, and you also want to be able to identify generally the way that the body is put together. And so, for example, the HESI seems to have a lot of questions about the bones that are in the ear and the bones that are in the face and the bones of the arms and the legs. And so it's good to make sure that you know kind of the general names of those bones and where they are and all of that. Same with the muscles. You want to know just generally where the different muscles are and what their names are. And then for the reading comprehension, what the HESI does is they basically give you several passages that you read, and each of these passages is going to be a little bit different in style. So there might be like a scientific journal, or there might be a narrative, and they just give you some different things, different passages to read. And then after that, they'll usually ask several questions on that one passage. Then on the grammar section, you want to make sure that you know all of your parts of speech very well, because the HESI seems to focus a lot on that and asking you to kind of pick apart sentences and find different parts of speech. I saw a lot of that on the grammar section, because the vocab section specifically gets into your understanding of words and what they mean and how to use them. So the vocab section had a lot of words that they would give as an example in a sentence, and then they would ask what the word meant in that context, and then they would give you a multiple choice that you could choose from to choose what the closest meaning of that word was. So that was the majority of questions that I saw on the vocab section were structured like that. So that in general is the types of questions that I saw on each section. And now finally, I want to talk about the resources that I used to study for the HESI exam. So I was super privileged to be able to use 3 really great online courses, and I'm going to just share those 3 with you really quickly here, and I will be linking all of these below so that you can find them there as well. So if you have a little bit of a budget and you're able to purchase a course to study for the HESI exam, in my opinion, these 3 are really your top choices, and each of them is a little bit different from each other. They're different in different ways. I don't have time to get into that too much in this video, but in my opinion, each one of them has wonderful practice questions and wonderful practice tests that are very similar to the actual exam, and they also have very good in-depth explanations to explain why certain answers are correct and why certain answers are incorrect, And so it really helps you to prepare for the exam quickly, because these 3 courses, no matter which one you choose, it really helps you to focus your studies so that you know that you're studying what's actually going to be on the test. Part of the game in getting a good score on these tests is, of course, number 1, that you know the information that's going to be tested on it. That's important, but part of the game too is that you also need to know how to take this type of exam. And the only way that you're going to know how to take this specific exam is by getting a lot of practice, just taking practice tests over and over and over. In my opinion, that's one of the huge perks of these online courses, is that they have already put together just tons of practice questions, tons of practice tests for you that you can just take and retake until you are super confident in what you need to know for the exam, and also in how these sections are going to actually look when you go to take the exam. So the 3 different courses, Memetrics University, Nurse Hub, the HESI course, and then Smart Edition. And those 3 are all just excellent resources for studying for the HESI exam. I personally used those 3. I only had time to study for 2 weeks, and those 3 courses were literally a lifesaver in getting me ready for the HESI exam. And I was able to just really focus my studies in on what I needed to do, did a little bit every single day for 2 weeks, and then I took the HESI exam. I'll share a little bit at the end of this video about how I scored on the HESI. So I just want to say also, if you are on a really tight budget and you're not able to purchase one of these online courses, that's totally fine, of course, and you can find a lot of free resources online that will help you to prepare for the HESI exam. So I'm actually going to link a few free practice tests down below that I found that are really great, that have great questions very similar to the HESI exam, and so those can be extremely helpful resources for you guys. And also, if you are interested in a book, I would highly recommend Memetrics' HESI Secrets Guide, and I will also link that down below so that you guys can see that one. So in terms of study tips and preparing for the test, my biggest tip is just to plan and make sure that you know how much time you have left until the test, and then kind of break down day by day how much you're going to try to do each day to prepare. And that can really help you, because if you do a little bit every day, you're able to really retain a lot more information than if you just try to cram it all in the last few days before your exam, for example. Plan it out, make sure that you have a goal for, I'm going to study for an hour every single day, or I'm going to take a practice test for 1 section every single day or every other day, or whatever it is that works for you. But just make a plan and try to stick to that, because that can make a huge difference. Second tip is to identify what your weakest section is and focus on that section first. One great way to do this is to take a kind of like a diagnostic practice test when you're starting out your studies, and just take a full practice test, and from that you can just see, based on your grades, what is your weakest area, and then you can focus specifically on studying that section first, and then you also can focus on specific topics that you might be struggling with. Another perk of those online courses that I just mentioned earlier is that you can actually select questions based on topic. So in each of those courses, Memetrics University, Nurse Hub, and Smart Edition, they break down their questions into question banks, so you can select what topic you want to do questions on. So for example, you could say, okay, I've been really weak on the endocrine system for anatomy and physiology, and so you can go onto the course and specifically select the endocrine system questions and work through those, and then study the answers that they give you, because their answers are so in-depth that they really give you a lot of information to study from. So that is another way that really helped me to study. I just focused a lot on the questions that I had a harder time with. So focus on those areas that you're weakest in, and then as you get stronger on those, then begin studying the other areas that you feel like you're a little bit stronger in. And that way you can make sure that you are getting a well-rounded preparation for the HESI test. And then just real quick, I'll share with you guys how I actually did on the HESI exam. So after using those 3 different online courses and just studying probably about an hour, hour and a half every day, sometimes probably 2 hours or something, for 2 weeks, using those online courses, I took the HESI exam, and on the reading section, I got a 96%. On the grammar, I got 94%. On the vocab, 94%. On the anatomy and physiology, 92%. And then on the math, I got a 98%. So I was honestly very surprised by that. I had been pretty nervous about even getting an 80%, especially on the anatomy and physiology section. But those courses really helped me to hone in on exactly what I needed to know for the test, and then to make sure that I just practiced those things over and over again till I was super confident in them. That made the hugest difference for me. Hope that was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to make any more videos that you guys might be interested in. If you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful, you can go ahead and like this video below, and you can subscribe to my channel for more content that's similar to this. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.